Hello everybody, and really this video is going to be a really quick discussion of one of the proposed explanations for aggression, specifically the evolutionary explanation for aggression. Now, one of the biggest gender differences that I've mentioned in another video between men and women in aggression is that men tend to engage in physical aggression to a greater extent than women do. Now, part of the reason that has been offered to explain that from the evolutionary literature is that aggression, although not the ideal tactic, is one tactic in which men can compete with one another to establish dominance. All right, now why does dominance matter? Well, if you look at basically at many social species on the planet, chimpanzees, wolves, elephants, all right, if you look at most of the social species on the planet, you will note that there is a defined status hierarchy, with the most dominant at the top. And most of the resources, food and, yes, access to mates, flows to those at the top. So one of the explanations offered by the evolutionary literature is that aggression serves as a way for mates, males particularly, to compete with one another to establish dominance, then with access to dominance, acquire more resources. And then because we know that, particularly in humans, females tend to be attracted to men who have higher access to resources, whereas men tend to not care. In fact, that's a universal difference. We found that difference across on every continent in every major religion, economic type. So that it's a fairly consistent difference, where women tend to prefer men with high access to resources. Men tend to not care as much. So men compete with one another with aggression for dominance, which grants them greater access to resources, which all has the ultimate function of granting them greater access to potential mates. So the evolutionary literature argues that the reason men engage in physical aggression to a greater extent than women do, is so that they can establish dominance, therefore get higher access to resources, and hopefully, and the ultimate function of getting greater access to resources is to get access to reproductive resources. So again, according to the evolutionary literature, the principal function of aggression in men is to gain access to mates. Now, it goes about that through greater access to resources, but the principal function of aggression, according to the evolutionary literature, is to garner greater access to potential mates. All right? Now, why doesn't it work for women? Well, part of the reason that has been proposed is that because women across our evolutionary literature have been more responsible for the bearing and rearing of offspring than men have, their time has been divided between taking care of their offspring and gathering resources. So they don't have as much time to gather resources. So this isn't typically a trait that men look for in women. And as I mentioned earlier, men tend to not care much about women's access to resources on average. So for that reason, using physical aggression to assert dominance over other women doesn't actually provide much of a benefit to women. And therefore, there's not much advantage to engaging in physical aggression for women. Whereas, for all the reasons we've discussed so far, there is an advantage for engaging in physical aggression for men. And that is it for this video. As always, if you have any questions, please send them my way. But if not, take it easy.